The first snowflake hit the windshield like a warning. By the time I realized the road had disappeared, it was already too late. Tonight's stories aren't about ghosts that chase you. They're about storms that trap you, silence that watches you, and cold that waits patiently for you to give up. If you think a blizzard is just snow and wind, stay with me, because these are 3 chilling true blizzard horror stories that left real people questioning whether they ever truly escaped. If you enjoy true terrifying stories that crawl under your skin, make sure you subscribe now, because once the storm starts, there's no turning back. I was 27 years old when I took that job in northern Minnesota. The kind of place where winter isn't a season, it's a sentence. I worked overnight maintenance for a remote cell tower company, and most nights were quiet enough to make you forget the world existed beyond the snow. On the night everything went wrong, the weather report said light snowfall, nothing more. I'd heard that lie before. By the time I reached mile marker 113, the sky turned gray in a way that didn't look natural. Snow didn't fall so much as it hovered, thick and heavy, swallowing the headlights. The radio crackled, then went dead. No signal, no music, just the sound of wind scraping across the truck like fingernails. That's when I saw the car. It was half buried off the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly through the snow. I pulled over without thinking. Midwest instinct, help your neighbor. I stepped out and the cold punched the air out of my lungs. Inside the car was a woman in her 30s, pale, shaking, saying she'd been stuck for hours. Her phone was dead, her heater had failed. I told her to get in my truck. As we drove, the storm intensified, visibility dropping to nothing. The GPS spun uselessly. She kept asking where we were. I kept telling her we'd find the road again. Then she said something that froze me worse than the cold. She asked me why I'd stopped for her car when it had been abandoned for 3 days. I slammed the brakes. Snow swallowed the truck as the engine died. When I turned to look at her, the passenger seat was empty. No footprints, no door opened, just a thin layer of frost where she'd been sitting. The blizzard howled louder, like it was laughing. I spent the night trapped in that truck, hearing footsteps circle it, feeling hands press against the windows, leaving breath marks that vanished before I could focus on them. At dawn, a snowplow found me unconscious. They told me no abandoned car had ever been reported on that stretch of road. 3 days later, I found a news article from 8 years ago. A woman stranded during a whiteout. She froze less than a mile from where I picked her up. Episode 2, The Cabin That Would Not Let Us Leave. The second story happened in Colorado, high in the Rockies, where storms roll in fast and leave even faster. At least, that's what we believed when 4 of us rented a cabin for a weekend getaway. The forecast said snow, but nothing extreme. We laughed as the first flakes fell, toasted drinks by the fire, and joked about being snowed in for a night. By morning, the door wouldn't open. Snow had packed against it like concrete. Windows were buried halfway up. No cell service, no internet. The power flickered, then died completely. We were officially trapped. The first day was fine. Board games, candles, stories. The second night, we started hearing knocking. Soft at first, 3 slow taps against the back wall of the cabin. We assumed it was ice falling from the roof. Until it started responding. 1 knock from inside, 3 knocks answered back. We tried to dig out the door the next morning. The snow was wrong, too solid, too heavy, like it had been pressed into place deliberately. That's when we noticed footprints circling the cabin, perfectly spaced, leading nowhere and coming from nowhere. That night, the knocking turned into scratching. Then into a voice. It sounded like my friend Mark, who had gone outside briefly on the first night to grab firewood. He never came back inside. We assumed he was playing a joke and had gone to another cabin. Now his voice begged us to open the door. He said he was freezing. He said he was scared. But Mark was sitting next to us by the fire. We covered our ears as the voice screamed, shifting, sounding like each of us in turn. The walls creaked inward as if the cabin itself was bending. When rescuers reached us 2 days later, the storm had vanished. Clear skies. No footprints. No signs of pressure against the walls. They asked why we had boarded the back door shut from the inside. None of us remembered doing that. Mark quit his job a week later and moved south. He refuses to talk about that night. None of us go into the mountains anymore. I was 27 years old when I accepted a night maintenance contract in northern Minnesota, the kind of job people only take when they're desperate or stubborn enough to believe they can handle anything. I told myself it was temporary. 6 months of good pay, isolation, and overtime, then I'd move back south. What I didn't understand back then was that winter up there doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't rush, it waits. My job was simple on paper. Drive long stretches of empty highway at night, check remote cell towers, log any damage, and report back by morning. Most nights were silent except for the hum of the engine and the low whistle of wind slipping through frozen trees. That silence became familiar, almost comforting, until the night it felt like something was listening. The weather report said light snowfall. That should have been my first warning. Up north, the worst storms rarely announce themselves honestly. I was about 2 hours into my shift when the sky changed color, not dark, not stormy, just a flat gray that swallowed distance. Snow began to fall straight down at first, then sideways, then everywhere at once. The headlights stopped feeling useful. They just lit up the snow directly in front of me, like I was driving through a tunnel that kept shrinking. By the time I passed mile marker 113, the road vanished completely. No edges, no horizon, just white. That's when the radio cut to static. I remember tapping it, adjusting the dial, even though I knew it was pointless. Losing sound in a blizzard is worse than losing sight. Silence gives your thoughts too much room. A few minutes later, I saw the blinking lights. They were faint at first, amber flashes barely visible through the snow, off to the right side of the road. I slowed down, heart pounding, telling myself it was probably a stalled car. I pulled over, my tires crunching into snow deeper than I expected. The storm was louder outside, a constant roar like something rushing past my ears. The car was half buried, nose tilted downward into a drift. The hazard lights blinked weakly, as if they were running out of energy. I approached cautiously, calling out, my voice sounding small and useless in the wind. When I reached the driver's side window, I saw her. She looked exhausted, early 30s, maybe. Her lips were blue, her hands wrapped tightly around herself. The inside of the car was coated in frost. She looked at me like she wasn't sure I was real. She said she'd been stuck for hours. Her phone was dead, her heater stopped working. She asked if I could help. I didn't hesitate. I opened the passenger door of my truck and told her to get in. The warmth hit her immediately, and she started crying, quiet sobs like she'd already spent all her fear. As I pulled back onto what I hoped was the road, the snow intensified. The GPS spun uselessly, recalculating, then freezing altogether. I told her my name. She told me hers, but I don't remember it now. That bothers me more than anything else. She kept asking where we were. I kept saying we'd find a town or a plow or something soon. The truth was, I wasn't sure we were moving forward at all. The world outside the windshield looked exactly the same no matter how long we drove. Then she asked me a question that made my hands tighten on the wheel. She asked why I stopped for her car when everyone knew it had been abandoned for 3 days. I laughed at first, a nervous sound, and told her that wasn't possible. She didn't laugh back. She just stared straight ahead, her breath fogging the glass. I asked her what she meant. She turned slowly and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as relief mixed with something colder. She said no one had stopped when she waved. She said the storm didn't start until after she'd already realized she wasn't going anywhere. She said the cold came first, then the silence, then the waiting. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded, then stopped. The engine died instantly, like it had been cut on purpose. Snow rushed against the windows, filling every gap with white noise. I turned to her, heart hammering, ready to demand an explanation. The passenger seat was empty. There was no sound of a door opening. No movement, just frost forming where her body had been, outlining the shape of someone who wasn't there anymore. I jumped out of the truck, screaming her name into the storm, but there were no footprints. Not from her, not from me. The snow around the truck was untouched. That's when the sounds started. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching through snow that should have erased them instantly. They circled the truck, once, twice. I could feel pressure against the doors, like someone leaning in, testing them. The windows fogged from the outside, breath marks appearing and fading, over and over again. I stayed curled in the driver's seat all night, afraid to sleep, afraid to move, whispering to myself that morning would come. Every time the wind died down, I heard her voice, closer now, asking why I stopped. When daylight finally broke through the storm, I was barely conscious. A snowplow driver found my truck half buried and had to dig the door open. I tried to explain, but the words sounded wrong even to me. The final story comes from Alaska, where blizzards don't just isolate you, they erase you. Tom Weaver was a volunteer search and rescue pilot. Tough, experienced, respected. During a brutal winter storm, he was dispatched to locate a missing snowmobiler near the Brooks Range. Visibility was almost zero, but Tom insisted he could handle it. The last transmission from his plane was calm. He said he saw lights below him, strange lights, moving in a pattern that didn't make sense for vehicles or buildings. He said the storm sounded wrong through his headset, like something breathing. Then the radio picked up another voice. It claimed to be the missing snowmobiler. It knew Tom's name. It knew details it shouldn't have known. It told him to land. Ground control begged him to turn back. Tom hesitated. Then he said something no one expected. He said the voice was already inside the cockpit. The transmission cut out. Search teams found the plane 3 days later, perfectly intact, buried nose first in snow. No sign of a crash. No sign of Tom. The cockpit was empty, except for one thing. A handheld radio, switched on, still broadcasting faint static. Every now and then, during heavy storms, local pilots swear they hear Tom's voice over emergency frequencies, warning them not to follow. The lights below the snow.